Welcome back. Tom and Travis back with you. You know the season is approaching as this week all the polls came out. Inside Lacrosse, U.S. Lacrosse Magazine, men and women providing plenty of conversation.
The men's poll is definitely the most controversial. Virginia, the top team in the Inside Lacrosse preseason top 20, but number 2 on U.S. Lacrosse Magazine. The Cavs won their first national championship since 2011 last May. Return a ton from that team, bring back their entire starting attack. Matt Moore, Ian Laviano, Michael Krause. Go along with All-American midfielder Dox Aitken, face-off man Petey LaSala, and starting goalie Alex Rose.
Quite a bit.
Say more.
Quite a bit.
Penn State, the #1 team according to U.S. Lacrosse Magazine. Number 2 on Inside Lacrosse. The Nittany Lions are coming off their first ever run to championship weekend. They bring back Tour-Ton finalist Grant Ament, All-American Mac O'Keefe, along with much more scoring and their starting face-off man and goalie. Here's a side-by-side of the two polls. Towson is in both polls at 18 and 19. Syracuse, a team with a ton of hype, with the addition of transfer Chase Scanlon sitting at 8 and 7 in the polls. But notice the strength overall of the ACC. All 5 teams are in the top 11 in the country in both preseason polls.
So we got to get everybody's take on these preseason rankings. We now welcome in our analyst, Evan Washburn. Evan, let's start at the top because that's the biggest question out of all these things. We got Penn State and Virginia each get #1 votes. Who's your #1?
I mean, I see the case for UVA, but for some reason I've had Penn State in the front of my mind since we left Philadelphia, and that seems crazy because UVA won the national championship and as you've mentioned, returns a ton in their roster offensively. I know they've got some youth defensively, and if Sostad is healthy, that's a huge boost there on that end. But I like the idea of, and look, if this is the team I think is #1, then I'm going with Penn State. I understand why UVA is #1 on this list, but I think Penn State's gonna have a tear here, not just because of what they have and Amen and the rest of that offensive side of the roster, but there's just going to be a motivating factor that I think is going to be really valuable.
Yeah, it's one thing to have won the national title, and they had all these close games, but everything went their way last year for Virginia. Maybe the hunger to get back there isn't quite as much as what Penn State has, and I think you're right. There's also an argument to be said when you have the best player in the country, which I believe Grant Ament is entering this season, that's got to give you an edge.
I think so, and that's probably where I find myself just on the surface here, and this is just such a dangerous proposition when you're looking so far ahead and hedging and deciding which team should at least start the season in what spot. You can't go wrong with either one of these guys, but if you ask me right now, which you are, which roster I'd rather have, I'd take Penn State.
All right, so let's look at the rest of the top 10. Who's that team outside of those top 2 that you believe is one of those teams that may be a lock for championship weekend, at least as things stand right now?
I think Syracuse was underranked here. I think at 8, if I have it correctly, is a bit low. I would have liked them in the top 5. I don't have the list in front of me. I love the slideshow, by the way, Inside Lacrosse. I understand why, but it makes it tough to compile things. I guess I could work a little harder and just write them all down. But look, I just think Syracuse comes into this thing with a ton of continuity. They get guys back, obviously, and then via transfer. So healthy and reloaded and with some experience based off the way they played last year, to me, is a team that looks poised to make a run at this and maybe try and knock off the UVA, a Penn State, or Maryland, who are, in my mind, probably the top 3 teams in the country.
It's all about the page views, Evan, all about the page views. Let's look at the top 20 as a whole. And there are some teams down there that are, I think there are question marks for a lot of them. You look at some of the CAA teams like Towson and UMass. You got High Point in there. Who's the one that has the biggest question mark in your mind entering 2020?
It could be region bias, just because it's right down the road and it's the team I probably see the most. But the post-Pat Spencer era for Loyola, and obviously after a notable absence via the transfer market and what that does to them. And this is still a roster that has a lot of talented players. Should mention Jacob Stover as well, the netminder. Charlie Toomey, I think, is tasked with probably his greatest challenge now in how you recalibrate the identity of a program without a once in a generation. Excuse me, my TV's on. Once in a generation talent in Pat Spencer. So I think they're listed at 14. I could see them falling below that. I also see them finding a defensive and back to that sort of transitional rope unit mentality and making a run at maybe a top 10, right outside the top 10 type ranking over the course of the season.
Yeah, I'll be honest. The post-Pat Spencer and post-Chris Gray Patriot League is going to be a lot more interesting this year because it really seems like it's wide open.
I agree, and I'm excited to cover that league as we do at CBS Sports Network because Lehigh, I think they sat at 20 in these rankings. It is in a great position. They're going to win a ton of face-offs. So, yeah, man, it's going to be a lot of fun over the course of the year. Army obviously always brings something, and maybe Navy under new direction and Joe Amplo can get themselves in the mix as well.
Yeah, going to be a lot of fun. Evan, we have to wait till spring, but stay warm on those NFL sidelines, all right?
I will. And can we make this a slideshow and you can click through it for each response?
Each answer, that's what we'll do here on the website. Thanks, man.
You got it.